green to North Carolina's pines. They walked those miles with hope still in their minds. With every step, the pain was hard to bear. Yet through the tears, they chose to persevere. In Tennessee, they felt the river's cold embrace. Their spirit strong, no hardship could erase. The land of ancestors fading in their view, but their hearts held firm, love for what they knew. On the trail of tears where sorrow met the land, they carried dreams within a calloused hand. In Oklahoma, they found strength in pain, survived the journey through the snow and rain.
The Cherokee Nation and Cherokee Nation businesses, and secured the largest language investment in the tribe's history to expand Cherokee cultural preservation. He appointed the tribe's first delegate to the U.S. Congress and prioritized health and wellness initiatives, including record investments in behavioral health and addiction treatment. Chief Hoskin has also expanded tribal workforce training programs, sustainable housing, protections for natural resources, and educational opportunities for Cherokee of all ages. He, along with First Lady January Hoskin, has elevated the voices of women and children and their safety within the Cherokee Nation Reservation. It is truly an honor to have Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. of the Cherokee Nation as our chief.
Introduction, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be back. It's just been a short time, but I've been looking forward to this engagement for some time because of reasons I mentioned before. The significance of this day, the importance of the work that's been done collectively to protect moccasin men, and of course our dear friends and indispensable partners, the Trail of Tears Association. This venue is amazing, and I applaud the folks who organized it and found this venue. This venue is the type of venue that you see this screen and you think this is going to be amazing to have a PowerPoint on here that's really going to make what the speaker says come alive, whether it's maps or graphics or photos or statistics. I don't have any of that, but you can imagine as I'm going along how it might make it come alive. But we'll get by, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity to visit you. When you are tasked with talking about history, it's a challenge. You want to be accurate. As a politician, though, you have certain license, and so you can imagine that there may be a few stray ends, and that's why I'm glad my good friend Jack Baker is here. One of Jack's jobs is to come up after the chief and say, here's some things that were not quite right, but that's just the partnership that Jack and I have. This city of Chattanooga is, of course, one that figures prominently into American history in terms of the events, in terms of the locations, the sites, and it also figures into Cherokee history. But I can tell you, after our experience today, this is a city that is full of friends of the Cherokee people. That's the truth, obviously. As I noted, I'm in politics, not a historian, but I can tell you this, and I'm serious about this. I think anyone who holds a position Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation better lean on history, because the people that I have the good fortune to lead for this speck of time have such an incredible story, and it's one that can inform what one does if they get the chance to lead a great Indian nation. And that's what I have the opportunity to do. This job that I have, apart from being father and a husband and a grandfather, it's the most important thing I've ever done. It's the most important thing I get up and do every day. And so I think about my predecessors in this role. I think about the unique place that the Cherokee Nation has today as we close out the first quarter of the 21st century as an Indian nation full of people who are still here, with great many friends, studying history. Tells me what my predecessors were up against, what decisions they made, not just them singularly. You think about Chief Ross, his incredible leadership during some of the most difficult and challenging days in all of Cherokee history, and what he did collectively with his fellow Cherokee citizens. You think about what they achieved and the measures of progress that we can see just in their time. And I can tell you this, they all had fewer monetary resources than this principal chief has at his disposal, and they had a much smaller, shorter map or chronology to look back on. I have the benefit, as hopefully my successors will all be able to say, of having all of their experience to inform what I do and what the people that I serve with do. When I took this office August 14th, 2019, I realized that I get to stand in the shoes of so many people that came before me and did such amazing things that I thought studying what they did is absolutely the best thing that a chief can do. So I've tried to commit myself to that. I've had so much help along the way, and I'm looking around this room and I'm seeing so many people who helped me. One thing I'll mention, it was a year ago I saw the Save the Bin stickers in Tahlequah by some of the folks from this organization that brought it there. And I can tell you, just as an aside, I talked to a few people that said, you know, they've got a really tall order. They've got a really tall order. Don't know if they'll be successful. The road is kind of littered with people who've underestimated Cherokee people. They didn't get on this one, and you got my appreciation once again for all of that work. And I know that it came a lot. Let's speak up a little bit. The history, as I study it, informs me in two major respects. This is the first one, and I think it's the most important one. It's that each day, today, that the Cherokee people exist is a precious day. There's so many twists and turns, so many obstacles, so many acts of oppression and dispossession that might have meant, as I shared earlier, that it may have been a footnote in history rather than making history in the 21st century. So every day that we get to exist and continue this passion for being Cherokee is a precious one, and it shouldn't be wasted. It's just, frankly, unlikely that we're still here. I think it demands something of the leaders of this nation, but not just the leaders. It demands something of all of the citizens of this nation, and with the help of our friends, to continue this existence. So the second thing, and I think about this a lot, and it's probably inescapable for all of us, whether all of this, where we are, is completely by the design of the Creator, completely in our hands, or some combination. That's really an existential and spiritual question, but it does weigh on me. But I do know that if I look at the historic record, whatever gifts, whatever opportunities, whatever precious things the Creator handed to the Cherokee people, our ancestors did a great deal with those gifts, with those treasures, with those possessions. And so, again, looking at what they did is important. On my best day, I hope I do that. So, my mind always goes to the early part of the 19th century. To me, that was a remarkable, pivotal time in the country's history and in the Cherokee Nation's history. There was this pressure of a growing United States, new states imposed upon the Cherokee Nation, threatening our people, chipping away at our resources, eroding what it meant to be Cherokee. There had to be people that looked around as Cherokee people and thought, what sort of future do we have with all of this encroaching in on us? Promises that were not kept, allegiances that shifted. What our ancestors did, I think is absolutely remarkable. And if I had to share today one quality of our ancestors, one set of decisions that our ancestors made with young Cherokees right now, particularly with what's going on in the world that they're growing up in and inheriting, it would be this. We were faced with uncertainty about our future. And what we did, our ancestors did, is we leaned into democracy, into reason, into diplomacy, into the rule of law. It doesn't strike people in the western part of the world in particular as particularly bold now, but it was bold then. We had to change radically the way we arranged our society. And look, I'm a Cherokee and I know this about Cherokee people. There's more than a few Cherokees in here. If we agreed on everything, I don't think we'd recognize each other. I don't think we would I think we'd wonder if we were in the room with Cherokees if we agreed on everything. That's just the nature of things. And perhaps it's always been. But at that time, we made this collective decision. And underscoring and educating young people about how remarkable that was, and how difficult it was, is something I think we've got to do more of, so that they can know where they came from, and so that they can know that they come from a people that were at their best when times were toughest. They were at their best when they had each other's back, and thought about their collective destiny. Such a bold move. Today, democracy in the United States feels fragile to me. The rule of law in America seems at times like it's on the ropes. That worries me as an American. Here in the 21st century, if we choose as Americans to deal with what are a great deal of division, we've got to admit that to ourselves, is that we've got a lot of divisions in the country. But if we choose to deal with those divisions and even concerns about the existence of this country, and I've got some concerns. I believe in it, but I've got some concerns. If we lean on the rule of law and democracy and reason, I think we can get through it, but that wouldn't be particularly radical, would it? That wouldn't be particularly bold, would it? That would be leaning on principles that have been embedded and improved upon in the United States since she was founded. There's nothing particularly radical about that. But our ancestors in the early 19th century, decentralized as they were, in different townships, that was the way we organized our society. It's what worked best with our oral traditions and our ways of dealing with differences and our clan system. Moving to a centralized system in a fairly short period of time was an absolute revolution of thought and organization. It was radical. We had to do it. I think history proves we had to do it. They faced the prospect of possible extinction. They saw it coming, and they took a radical step. And they didn't go to war. They could have, might not have ended well. They didn't give in to the things that divided us, and my goodness, we had reason to be divided on this question about whether we radically changed the way we governed ourselves. But we didn't do that. We went from decentralization to centralization to a written constitution, an elected chief, and it was radical, it was revolutionary. Not a single shot was fired. There wasn't a coup, there wasn't a mob, and yet it was still radical and dramatic. But our ancestors, I think, looked at our surroundings, looked at an uncertain future, poured themselves into a government by the people, for the people, and one based on written legal principles. They were driven, I think, by what I hope drives Cherokees today, and I know drives us to a great extent, and on our best day it drives us, which is that we owe something to each other. That we're not just an every person for himself society. That we have a common past. And that's worth something. And we've got a common culture and a language if we can hang on and revitalize it. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And that if we're going to have a common future, it's true today, but it was sure true back then, that we had to recognize what we owed to each other if we were going to stay as Cherokee people. All around us was pressure. Georgia, in particular, was imposing its laws, wasn't it? It sent citizens to seize our lands. It invalidated our laws. We know gold was discovered in our hills. And we know that most of the time when a society finds gold in their hills, they say, oh, Eureka. But if you're a Cherokee and it's the 19th century and you're surrounded by Georgians and other white Americans, you don't say, oh, Eureka, you say, oh, something else. Because you know what's happening. Georgians stole it under color of law. Sequoyah, of course, figures in to be one of the most important geniuses in the history of the Cherokee Nation. A young farmer and silversmith who decided to develop something. What he developed, this is the other thing I share with young Cherokees, he developed something that was more powerful than any sword or any shield any Cherokee ever wielded before and ever wielded since. And that was the written language. It was a revolution of thought, a revolution of organizing, and a revolution of communications. And the Cherokee people adopted it when they might have moved away from it. That was another radical change to our society, but it was worth it. And so, using Sequoyah's great invention, we not only communicated with each other, we communicated in English and in Cherokee, and we communicated with the world. And this is the other thing that I hope is not lost on the Cherokee people. I don't think it is. I hope it's not lost on young Cherokees. I don't think it is. And I hope the rest of the country can deepen its understanding of it. Is the Cherokee people weren't simply run over, we weren't simply rounded up in stockades, we weren't simply marched across the country in our removal and perished, saw a quarter of our population perish. We stood our ground, we organized, we resisted, and we resisted in part not by wielding weapons or showing our shields, but using reason, using diplomacy, strengthening our government because we adapted his great invention. I want young Cherokees to know, whether it's in the larger society, whether it's in the governments to which they belong, or it's in their own lives, so that they can choose what their ancestors chose. And their ancestors chose a path of using their minds, of building up strength, of having each other's back. Our young Cherokees have a great many challenges and face a great deal of uncertainty in their own lives. I think they need a dose of what their ancestors did. I think they need to think about that. And I think those of us who are not as young ought to do all we can to help explain to them where they came from. And that they're here, in part, because their ancestors chose that path, not a path of violence, not a path of division. That's what their ancestors did to success. And it wasn't weakness, it was strength. And I want them to know that. The other thing I want them to know is this. We celebrate, talk a lot about the case of Worcester versus Georgia. I want them to know about it. I want them to know when the state of Georgia applied their laws to our people and our friends like Samuel Worcester, one of the great heroes of the Cherokee story, and he wasn't Cherokee. I want them to know that we took them to their own courts and we won. Again, that was the path that we chose. And it was a path that, even though did not stop our removal, built something in our national character that would fuel us into that next great chapter. And I don't want to and shouldn't give short shrift to the brutality and the injury and the injustice and the act of oppression and dispossession that was our forced removal. I want young Cherokees to know that. But I sure want them to know what their ancestors who survived did. After removal, we were, of course, split. You hear about people being at each other's throats. You know your history. Our people were at each other's throats. I mean, they were at each other's throats. Our future was in doubt because we might have given in to the political violence that was gripping the Cherokee Nation after removal. We might have given in to the differences about how we should govern ourselves after removal and what treaties meant. We didn't do that. The United States today, as I mentioned, feels fractured. I don't think it's anything compared to the fracture that was gripping the Cherokee people after our forced removal that ended in 1839. But our ancestors wielded wisdom and foresight, and they remembered that they owed something to each other, that it was worth having each other's back. In 1839, they forged the Act of Union, a remarkable document which brought us back together at a time when the rest of the world not only predicted we'd stay apart, but were probably hoping we'd stay apart to solve this Cherokee problem once and for all, because they'll just be at each other's throats. And of course, we crafted the Constitution of 1839. We did something else. We invested in things that matter, that build a great society. This is the other thing I learned from our history. What did we invest in when we didn't have much left after our removal? We invested in democracy. We invested in the rule of law. Even though those ideas and principles either let us down in this country or were used against us as a weapon. Even though the United States tried to crush those things, we still believed in it. There's a great deal more of our history that happened after removal, but that era of history, before removal, what we did, what we believed in, what got us through it, and what we did after we were potentially at each other's throats, irreparably, but stuck together. Those are the things that inform what I do as Principal Chief on my best day with a great many wonderful leaders. So here's what we're doing today. We're thinking about what our ancestors believed in. Democracy. Democracy is not just a principle, it's not just an idea, it's got to be an action, it's got to be wielded. And so what we do is we reach out to our citizens in ways we haven't before all over the country. We've got this amazing tool online called the Gadugi portal. Many of you who are Cherokee citizens may access that. We send the Cherokee Phoenix free to all of our citizens. That great press born of Sequoia's genius, still around. We send it to all of our citizens. Our voter turnout and participation is far too low, but we're registering thousands and thousands of Cherokees, including today, here in Chattanooga. And voter participation last election was up 25% from the previous one. We've got to keep improving that. We're supporting grassroots Cherokees through community organizations. There was a gentleman that showed up tonight at our photo ID event. He said, I want to organize. That's music to my ears. That's how this nation is stronger a year from now, a generation from now than it is today. Because Cherokees want to keep it alive no matter where they live. Here in Chattanooga is where they can do it. We've got a new volunteer organization called the Gadugi Corps, in which people all over the country that are Cherokee can come home, pitch in, and if you're living in the Cherokee Nation, there's a great deal of work to do as a volunteer or a national service participant. This is significant. We are meeting the moment back home when it comes to the McGirt case, the reaffirmation of our reservation. That reservation described in our removal treaty and changed, but still there. In the Treaty of 1866, that's ours. But if it's ours, it's got to mean something. We have to take it serious. So we're pouring millions of dollars into making sure our criminal justice system works. If we fail at that, then we've not exercised what a responsible sovereign government must do. And we've let down our ancestors. There's a great deal more we're doing. The things that our ancestors did look different than what we're doing today, but it's the same principle. It's the idea we owe something to each other. And that may take the form of a healthcare system that today is the best in Indian country, and we're building towards a world-class system of wellness with a new hospital, a comprehensive array of ways to care for people, to help get them healthy. That's what our ancestors were doing, just in a different way. That's what the Cherokee people have always been able to do when the government of the United States has unshackled us and allowed us to continue on building a great Cherokee society. We just approved $40 million over the next 3 years for housing and community buildings because too many of our elders are living in conditions we wouldn't want our grandparents living in. And too many young Cherokees are having to make tough choices about whether they can stay in the communities that they want to stay in and work there because housing is too scarce. We're doing something about it. Just this year, about 7,000 Cherokees are going to college on a scholarship paid for by the Cherokee Nation. That is an investment in power and wealth and education, and that alone is going to strengthen this nation for generations to come. But it's exactly what our ancestors were doing after removal. You remember when they founded the female seminary. You remember when they formed the first system of free public education in what would become Oklahoma before anyone ever heard of the state of Oklahoma. Our people did that. We still believe in it. We're working on natural resources and recreation opportunities. I hope when the Trail of Tears Association comes back to Tahlequah for the next conference, I hope you'll visit the Wilma. I just met a young man an hour ago who just graduated with an IT degree from the University of Missouri. He lives in Chattanooga, and I said, you need to come to work for the Cherokee Nation. He said, I hadn't planned to move back to Tahlequah. I said, we can work anywhere in the country, maybe anywhere in the world. That's what kind of an era we're living in right now. That's what gives me a great deal of hope. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot of work to do in the future.
They carry dreams within a callous